Terrence Bradford stood at the aircraft door watching airport security escort the pilot in handcuffs down the jetway. Nobody on Flight SB-747 knew that 15 minutes earlier this same captain had denied the black man in the simple Navy suit his rightfully purchased first-class seat. Now the entire cabin sat frozen as the gate agent's voice crackled through the intercom with words that shattered everything. "This airline belongs to the man you just humiliated. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city and country in the comments below. If this story already has your attention, smash that like button and hit subscribe, because what happens next will shake you to your core. Trust me, you need to see how this unfolds. The morning started like any other Friday at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. Travelers rushed through security checkpoints while the aroma of fresh coffee drifted from corner cafes. Announcement chimes echoed across terminals. Business people scrolled through phones. Families corralled excited children toward gates. Just another ordinary travel day in the busiest airport in America. Terrence Bradford walked through Terminal B with unhurried confidence. At 42 years old, he had learned that real power never needed to announce itself. His charcoal suit was tailored but understated. His leather briefcase showed quality without flash. Nothing about his appearance screamed wealth or authority. That was exactly the point. As CEO of Skybridge Airlines, Terrence could have traveled any way he wanted. Private jets, chartered flights, VIP airport services that bypassed every line and inconvenience. But today, he had chosen differently. Today, he wanted to experience his airline exactly as his customers did. Anonymous, unrecognized, vulnerable to the same systems and people who served thousands of passengers daily. He approached the check-in counter, where a young woman named Stephanie greeted him with a practiced smile. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she pulled up his reservation. "Good morning, sir. Traveling to Los Angeles today." "Yes, the 9:30 departure." "Perfect. I have you in seat 2, A first class. Can I see your identification, please?" Terrence handed over his driver's license. Stephanie processed it without a second glance, printed his boarding pass, and wished him a pleasant flight. Professional, efficient, exactly how it should work. He made his way through security, bought a copy of the Wall Street Journal at a newsstand, and found a quiet corner near his gate. Around him, the airport hummed with life. A mother tried to calm a crying toddler. 2 college students debated their spring break plans. An elderly couple held hands while waiting to board. Terrence gazed out the massive windows at the aircraft lined up on the tarmac. Somewhere out there sat one of his planes. Skybridge had grown from a small regional carrier to one of the nation's major airlines under his leadership. 30 planes had become 90. 3 routes had expanded to 47. A struggling company on the verge of bankruptcy had transformed into a profitable operation employing over 6,000 people. But none of that guaranteed respect. Terrence knew this truth intimately. He had fought for every degree, every promotion, every achievement in his life. Growing up in a working-class neighborhood on Atlanta's South Side, he had watched his father work double shifts as an aircraft mechanic, while his mother pulled night shifts as a hospital nurse. They had sacrificed everything so their son could attend college. He graduated top of his class in aerospace engineering from Georgia Tech, started as a junior engineer at a major airline, earned his MBA while working full-time, climbed from middle management to executive leadership through sheer determination and brilliance that could not be ignored. 5 years ago, the board had named him CEO. Yet even now, even after everything he knew, what many people saw first when they looked at him, not the degrees, not the track record, not the vision that had saved this company, just skin color, just assumptions, just prejudice wearing 1,000 subtle masks. His phone buzzed. A text from his executive assistant, Catherine. "Safe travels, boss. The LA team is ready for tomorrow's meeting." Terrence smiled and typed back, "See you Monday." The gate agent announced pre-boarding for passengers needing extra time. Terrence gathered his things and joined the first-class line. A handful of travelers stood ahead of him. A businessman in an expensive watch checked his phone. An older woman clutched a designer handbag. A young couple whispered and laughed together. The gate agent, a woman in her 50s named Diane, scanned boarding passes with mechanical efficiency. She greeted each passenger with the same rehearsed warmth. "Welcome aboard, sir. Enjoy your flight. Good morning, ma'am. Have a wonderful trip." Terrence stepped forward and handed her his boarding pass. Diane's smile flickered. Just for a second, just enough for him to notice. Her eyes traveled from the boarding pass to his face, then back to the boarding pass. She scanned it once. The system beeped. She scanned it again. "Is there a problem?" Terrence asked politely. "Just a moment, sir." Diane's tone had shifted. The warmth had evaporated. She studied the boarding pass more closely, then looked up at him with barely concealed suspicion. "This shows seat 2A in first class." "That's correct. And you purchased this ticket yourself?" The question landed like a slap. Terrence felt the familiar tightening in his chest. The shame that came not from anything he had done, but from what others assumed about him. "Yes, I purchased it 3 weeks ago." Diane pressed her lips together. She turned and called to another gate agent standing nearby. "Paula, can you come verify something?" A younger woman hurried over. Diane showed her the boarding pass and whispered something Terrence could not quite hear. Paula glanced at him, then at the screen, then back at him. The two women conferred in low voices while other passengers in line began to shift impatiently. "Excuse me, a man called from behind Terrence. Is there a holdup?" "Just one moment," Diane called back, without looking away from her screen. She picked up the gate phone and spoke quietly into it. Terrence stood perfectly still. Every instinct screamed at him to speak up, to demand an explanation, to assert his rights. But he forced himself to wait, to observe, to let this play out. Because this was exactly what he had come to discover: how his airline treated passengers who looked like him when nobody was watching, when no CEO hovered nearby, when people revealed their true assumptions. Diane hung up the phone and turned back to him with a tight, forced smile that never reached her eyes. "Sir, we're going to need to verify your ticket once you're on board. You can proceed, but please speak with the flight attendants before you sit down." "Why is verification necessary?" Terrence kept his voice level. "It's just standard procedure for certain bookings." "What makes my booking require this procedure?" Diane's jaw tightened. "Sir, you can either board the aircraft or step aside so we can process other passengers." Behind him, the line had grown. People murmured. Someone sighed loudly. Terrence felt a dozen eyes on his back. He could push this now. He could reveal who he was. He could end this humiliation with a single sentence. Instead, he picked up his briefcase and walked down the jetway. The jetway stretched ahead, fluorescent lights humming overhead. Terrence's footsteps echoed off the metal floor. Through the small windows, he could see ground crew loading luggage, fuel trucks connecting to the wing, the controlled chaos that made flight possible. He reached the aircraft door. A flight attendant stood there with a smile that immediately reminded him of Diane's expression. Friendly, until it wasn't. This attendant wore a name tag that read Diane. Same woman now aboard early to coordinate boarding. Her smile tightened the instant she recognized him. "Sir, the supervisor needs to speak with you about your seat assignment before you proceed." "I was told to speak with flight attendants. I'm speaking with you now. My seat is 2A. "Yes, I understand, but we need supervisory approval for certain first-class passengers." "Which passengers require supervisory approval?" Diane's face flushed. "Sir, if you'll just wait here a moment." She disappeared into the cabin. Terrence stood in the doorway while passengers from later boarding groups began entering behind him. They squeezed past him with annoyed glances. A man in a polo shirt muttered something about people holding up the line. The first-class cabin came into view as Terrence stepped forward. 8 wide leather seats, arranged in 2 rows on each side. Soft lighting, warm wood accents. This was the premium experience Skybridge sold. The luxury that commanded ticket prices 3 times higher than economy. Seat 2A waited by the window on the left side. Terrence moved toward it. Before he could sit, another flight attendant materialized. This woman was older, perhaps 60, with steel gray hair pulled back severely. Her name tag identified her as Ruth, and the extra wings on her uniform marked her as a supervisor. "Sir, I need to see your boarding pass and identification." Terrence handed them over. Ruth examined both with the intensity of a detective studying evidence. She pulled out a tablet and tapped through several screens. When did you purchase this ticket? 3 weeks ago. What credit card did you use? Why does that matter? Sir, I'm asking the questions. What credit card? Terrence reached into his wallet and pulled out a Platinum American Express card. Ruth barely glanced at it. This still doesn't explain the discrepancy. What discrepancy? Terrence asked, keeping his voice calm despite the anger building inside him. Our system is flagging your reservation. Flagging it for what? Ruth didn't answer. She turned to Diane, who had reappeared. Get the captain. By now, several first-class passengers had boarded and taken their seats. A man in an expensive suit sat in 2B right next to Terrence's assigned seat. This passenger, who appeared to be in his mid-50s with graying temples and a Rolex, watched the interaction with obvious interest. When Terrence finally moved to sit in 2A, the man physically recoiled. He pulled his leather bag closer to his body, as if Terrence might contaminate it. Then he pressed the call button. Diane appeared immediately. Yes, Mr. Patterson, how can I help you? Is this seating arrangement confirmed? I paid extra specifically for seat selection. We're verifying that right now, sir. Gregory Patterson nodded curtly and shot Terrence a look of pure disdain. Across the aisle, a well-dressed woman whispered to her companion, loud enough for Terrence to hear. I don't understand how some people can afford these tickets. Makes you wonder where the money comes from. Her companion, an older man with a thick mustache, shook his head. Standards aren't what they used to be. Anyone can buy their way into first class now. Terrence gripped his armrest. 30 years of dealing with racism had taught him to control his reactions, to never give prejudiced people the satisfaction of seeing him lose composure. But the cumulative weight of 1,000 small humiliations pressed down on him in this moment. He was a man who had built his entire life on merit and excellence. A man who had earned everything he possessed. A man whose decisions affected thousands of employees and millions of passengers. Yet here, in the first-class cabin of his own airline, he was being treated like a criminal whose very presence required justification. Ruth returned with the tablet. Sir, we've contacted ground operations about your ticket. And what did ground operations say? They're looking into it. How long will that take? As long as necessary. A younger flight attendant, an Asian woman named Paula, who had helped verify his boarding pass at the gate, stood nearby, looking increasingly uncomfortable. She caught Terrence's eye and quickly looked away. More passengers filed past. A tech executive with expensive noise-canceling headphones. A mother with 2 small children heading to the economy section. A college student with a backpack covered in travel patches. Each person absorbed the tense scene playing out in first class. Ruth stepped away to use the onboard phone. Through the open cockpit door, Terrence could see her speaking with someone, gesturing toward the cabin. A moment later, she returned. Sir, the captain wants to speak with you. Why does the captain need to be involved? He makes the final decisions about passenger seating on his aircraft. Terrence stood slowly. Every eye in first class watched him. Gregory Patterson smirked. The whispering woman raised her eyebrows. Even passengers in the visible rows of economy craned their necks to see what was happening. Ruth led him toward the front of the cabin. But before they reached the cockpit, a man emerged wearing the crisp uniform of a commercial pilot, 4 stripes on his shoulders, silver wings on his chest, aviator sunglasses despite being indoors. Captain Ronald Hutchinson had the bearing of someone who had never questioned his own authority. He was 58 years old, white with graying hair, and a jaw set in permanent disapproval. 35 years of flying had given him a sense of absolute power within the confined space of an aircraft. His word was law at 30,000 feet, and he clearly believed that extended to every aspect of his command. Ronald looked Terrence up and down with undisguised contempt. What seems to be the problem here, Ronald's voice carried the weight of assumed authority. He didn't address Terrence directly. He spoke to Ruth as if discussing a malfunctioning piece of equipment. Captain, this passenger's ticket is showing some irregularities in our system. We're trying to verify his first-class purchase. Irregularities. Ronald removed his sunglasses and studied Terrence with cold blue eyes. Sir, what's your name? Terrence Bradford. Well, Mr. Bradford, it seems there's some confusion about your ticket. I'm going to need you to take a seat in economy class while my crew sorts this out. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Around them, the cabin had gone completely silent. Even the usual sounds of passengers stowing luggage and settling into seats had stopped. Everyone watched. Terrence met Ronald's stare without flinching. "Captain, my ticket is completely valid. I purchased seat 2A 3 weeks ago. I've provided my boarding pass, my identification, and my credit card." "What specific irregularity are you referring to?" "Sir, I don't need to explain my decisions to you. This is my aircraft. I am responsible for the safety and security of everyone on board. If I determine that a passenger's presence in first class is questionable, I have the authority to reassign that passenger." "Questionable? Based on what criteria?" Ronald's face reddened. "Based on my professional judgment." "Your professional judgment that a black man can't afford a first-class ticket?" The accusation hit like a thunderclap. Several passengers gasped. Gregory Patterson's smirk vanished. Ruth took a step back. Diane looked at the floor. Ronald's voice turned to ice. "Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time to move to economy class voluntarily. If you refuse, I will have airport security remove you from this aircraft entirely. The choice is yours." Terrence felt the rage building inside him. Not the hot, explosive anger that people expected, but the cold, calculated fury that came from experiencing this same degradation over and over throughout his life. Being followed in department stores. Being stopped by police for driving in nice neighborhoods. Being questioned about his right to be in spaces he had earned access to through hard work and achievement. He thought about his father, who had endured far worse during the civil rights era. His father, who had been denied service at restaurants, who had been forced to use separate water fountains, who had been called names that still made Terrence's blood boil. His father, who had nevertheless worked himself to exhaustion so his son could have opportunities he never had. And Terrence thought about his mother, who had been passed over for promotions by less qualified white nurses, who had smiled through casual racism from patients and colleagues, who had taught her son to be twice as good to get half as far. Their sacrifices had brought him to this moment, CEO of an airline, master of his own destiny, or so he had believed. But here he stood being ordered out of a first-class seat on his own airline by a pilot who worked for him, a pilot who had no idea who he was addressing, a pilot who saw only skin color and made assumptions based on prejudice so deeply ingrained he probably didn't even recognize it as racism. Terrence could end this now. 3 words would change everything. "I own Skybridge." But something stopped him. Some need to see how far this would go. How far Ronald Hutchinson would take his discrimination when he thought there would be no consequences. Captain Terrence said slowly, "I am asking you as a paying passenger with a valid ticket to explain the specific policy violation that requires me to move. The policy is my judgment. Then your judgment is based on racial profiling." Ronald stepped closer, invading Terrence's personal space in a clear act of intimidation. "Sir, you have 10 seconds to move to economy or exit this aircraft." 10, 9, 8. Passengers pulled out phones. Several were recording now. This confrontation would be on social media within minutes, but none of them knew they were witnessing something far bigger than a typical airline dispute. 7, 6, 5. Ruth touched Ronald's arm. "Captain, maybe we should just let him." 4, 3, 2. Terrence picked up his briefcase. The cabin erupted in whispers. Gregory Patterson actually smiled. The woman who had questioned how people like Terrence could afford first class nodded with satisfaction. But Terrence didn't move toward economy. He walked toward the exit. "Smart choice," Ronald muttered. Then louder, "Diane, remove his luggage from the hold." As Terrence stepped into the jetway, he heard Ronald addressing the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for that disruption. Some people simply don't understand that first class is a privilege that must be earned." The door closed behind Terrence. He stood alone in the jetway, heart-pounding hands, trembling with suppressed rage. 30 passengers had just watched a pilot humiliate him. Dozens more would see it on social media. His own airline, his own employees, his own company culture had just revealed itself in the ugliest possible way. Terrence reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Time to earn that privilege, Ronald mentioned. Time to show exactly what happened when you discriminated against the wrong passenger. He dialed Catherine's direct line. She answered on the first ring. "Mr. Bradford, is everything okay?" "No, Catherine. Everything is not okay." Terrence walked up the jetway toward the gate phone, pressed to his ear, voice low but sharp with controlled fury. "Catherine, I need you to listen carefully. I was just removed from Flight SB 747 by Captain Ronald Hutchinson. He denied me my first-class seat and ordered me off the aircraft." "What? That's impossible. Why would?" Catherine's voice trailed off as understanding dawned. "Oh my God. He didn't know who you are." He knew exactly what he needed to know. A black man in first class. That was enough. "Sir, what do you want me to do?" "First, pull Captain Hutchinson's complete personnel file. Every complaint, every incident report, every performance review. I want it in my email within 5 minutes. Second, contact Harrison in legal. Tell him I need a full discrimination case file started immediately. Third, get me the airport director on the phone. And fourth, contact our chief of flight operations. I want to know who approved Hutchinson's schedule and why someone with his record is still flying our planes." "His record, sir, has this happened before." "That's what I'm about to find out. 5 minutes, Catherine." Terrence ended the call and stood at the gate window watching ground crew move around his aircraft. Passengers boarding late hurried past him. The gate agent, Diane, had disappeared somewhere, probably relieved the problem passenger was gone. His phone buzzed. An email from Catherine with a large attachment. Terrence opened Captain Ronald Hutchinson's personnel file and began to read. What he found made his blood run cold. 7 complaints in 12 years. 7 separate incidents of discriminatory behavior toward passengers of color. A Hispanic family questioned about fake tickets in 2019. A black businessman asked to prove he could afford first class in 2021. An Asian couple told their seats were being reassigned due to weight distribution despite an empty cabin. A Middle Eastern man subjected to excessive security questioning at Ronald's insistence. Every complaint had been investigated. Every investigation had concluded with the same meaningless phrase: counseling provided, no further action warranted. The complaints were buried in his file like dirty secrets. And Ronald had been protected by a system that valued stability over justice. Terrence scrolled further. Performance reviews revealed the truth. Excellent technical skills, but occasional issues with passenger relations. Captain Hutchinson would benefit from cultural sensitivity training. Some passengers have expressed discomfort with Captain Hutchinson's demeanor. Bureaucratic language concealing ugly reality. He looked up from his phone. Through the window, he could see the aircraft door still closed, the jetway still connected. Inside that plane, Ronald Hutchinson probably felt triumphant. Another troublemaker removed. Another smooth flight ahead. Another day of absolute authority unchallenged. The man had no idea what was coming. Terrence's phone rang. "Unknown number," he answered. "Mr. Bradford, this is Warren Hughes, airport director. Your assistant said you needed to speak with me urgently." "Mr. Hughes, are you aware that one of my pilots just removed me from my own aircraft based on racial profiling?" Silence. Then, "Excuse me. Captain Ronald Hutchinson of Skybridge Airlines Flight 747 denied me my first-class seat and forced me to deplane. He did this because I'm black. I have 30 witnesses and multiple video recordings." "Mr. Bradford I, this is unacceptable. What do you need from airport operations?" "I need security at Gate B-17 immediately. I need you personally to escort Captain Hutchinson off that aircraft. And I need every passenger on that flight to understand exactly what just happened." "We'll be there in 3 minutes." "Let me ask you something. If you were in Terrence's position, what would you do? Would you reveal yourself immediately, or would you let the situation play out to expose the full extent of the discrimination?" Comment number 1 if you think he's doing the right thing by waiting. And if you think this story is important, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what happens when that captain finds out who he just humiliated. Because what comes next is going to be absolutely shocking. Do you think Ronald Hutchinson has any idea what he's done? Do you think he'll try to apologize, or will his arrogance make everything worse? Stay with me, because the confrontation you're about to witness will restore your faith in justice. Warren Hughes arrived at gate B-17 with 3 airport security officers. He was a tall man in his early 60s with silver hair and the efficient manner of someone who had spent 40 years managing crisis situations. But the look on his face suggested he had never handled anything quite like this. He spotted Terrence immediately and approached with quick, purposeful strides. "Mr. Bradford, I cannot apologize enough. This is absolutely unacceptable." Terrence shook his hand. "Mr. Hughes, I appreciate your response, but apologies won't fix a broken system. What will fix it is accountability." "Absolutely, sir. What would you like us to do?" "I want you to board that aircraft. I want you to personally inform Captain Hutchinson that the CEO of Skybridge Airlines requests his immediate presence at this gate. Use those exact words, and I want it done in front of the passengers so they understand what's happening." Warren nodded to his security team. "Eugene, Marcus, Linda, you're with me." The 4 of them walked down the jetway. Terrence remained at the gate window watching through the glass. His heart pounded with anticipation. Not nervousness, not fear, but the righteous anger of someone who had endured a lifetime of disrespect and finally had the power to demand better. His phone buzzed again. "A text from Harrison and Legal, sir. We can have a lawsuit drafted within the hour if needed, but I recommend internal disciplinary action first. Send a message to all employees." Terrence typed back, "Agreed. Prepare termination paperwork for Hutchinson. I want him off our payroll today." Another text, this time from Solomon Grant, the HR director. "Mr. Bradford, Catherine briefed me. I'm reviewing all discrimination complaints filed against flight crew in the past 5 years. We have a serious pattern here that was never properly addressed." Terrence responded, "Full report by Monday. And Solomon, whoever buried these complaints, answers to me personally." Through the gate window he saw movement. Warren and the security team had boarded. Inside the aircraft he could imagine the scene. Passengers settled in their seats, anticipating departure. Flight attendants completing final checks. Ronald in the cockpit, running through pre-flight procedures. And then the knock on the cockpit door, the confusion when security appeared, the slow dawning realization that something had gone very wrong. 90 seconds later, the aircraft door opened. Warren emerged first, followed by Ronald Hutchinson. The captain still wore his aviator sunglasses, still carried himself with that unshakable confidence. He walked up the jetway with the annoyed expression of someone whose time was being wasted. He didn't see Terrence at first. He was complaining to Warren. "I don't understand why this couldn't wait until after the flight. We're already behind schedule because of that passenger situation." Captain Hutchinson Warren said quietly, "The CEO is waiting." "Bradford, what does he want?" "I filed my incident report about the security concern. It's all documented." They emerged into the gate area. Ronald turned, scanning the space for whoever he expected to see. His eyes passed over Terrence once dismissively, then moved on, then froze, then returned. For 5 full seconds, Ronald Hutchinson stared at Terrence Bradford without comprehension. His brain could not reconcile the passenger he had removed with the CEO he reported to. It was impossible. It made no sense. Then understanding crashed over him like a wave. The blood drained from his face. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The sunglasses slipped down his nose, revealing eyes wide with horror. "Mr. Bradford," he whispered. I didn't." "Didn't what, Captain Hutchinson?" Terrence stepped forward, his voice calm but carrying across the gate area. Several passengers waiting for other flights turned to watch. "Didn't know, didn't realize, didn't think a black man could possibly be the CEO of this airline." "Sir, there was a system error. The ticket showed irregularities. I was following protocol." "What protocol requires you to remove a passenger with a valid ticket, valid ID, and valid credit card from first class? What protocol tells you to judge whether someone belongs in a premium cabin based on the color of their skin?" Ronald glanced at Warren, at the security officers, at the growing crowd of onlookers. His pilot's uniform, which usually commanded respect, now felt like a costume. His authority, so absolute inside the aircraft, meant nothing here. "Mr. Bradford, I sincerely apologize. If I had known. If you had known I was the CEO, you would have treated me with respect. But every other black passenger who doesn't own this airline, they deserve your contempt. They deserve to be humiliated and removed from flights they paid for." "No, sir, I didn't mean." "What did you mean, Captain, when you told me I didn't understand that first class is a privilege that must be earned? What exactly did you mean?" The gate area had gone silent. Passengers stared. Gate agents watched from their desks. Even the background announcements seemed to fade away. Ronald's face had gone from pale to red. Sweat beaded on his forehead. "Sir, I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. Please, I have 35 years with this airline. I have a family." "I never intended." "You never intended to get caught." Terrence cut him off. "Your personnel file tells a different story, Captain. 7 complaints in 12 years. 7 times you've targeted passengers of color. 7 times you've abused your authority. And 7 times you faced no real consequences. Those were misunderstandings. No, those were choices. You chose to see black and brown passengers as suspicious. You chose to question their right to occupy spaces you deemed too good for them. You chose to wield your power as a weapon against people who couldn't fight back." Warren shifted uncomfortably. Eugene, the lead security officer, kept his expression neutral, but his eyes showed something like satisfaction. Several passengers pulled out phones to record. Ronald's voice cracked. "Mr. Bradford, please. I'm sorry. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. Sensitivity training, community service, anything." Terrence studied him for a long moment. This man who had made him feel small. This man who had questioned his worth. This man who had humiliated him in front of dozens of strangers. Now begging, now pleading, now desperate. But this wasn't about revenge. It was about every passenger who would come after. Every person of color who would step onto a Skybridge aircraft and deserve to be treated with dignity. Every employee who needed to understand that discrimination would not be tolerated at any level. "Captain Hutchinson, as of this moment you are suspended without pay pending a full investigation into your conduct. You will surrender your crew credentials, your security badge, and your access to all Skybridge facilities. Security will escort you from this airport. You will not board another Skybridge aircraft as a crew member until our investigation is complete. And if the investigation confirms what I already know, your career with this airline is over." Ronald's legs seemed to weaken. He grabbed the edge of a nearby chair for support. "Sir, please. 35 years. My pension, Should have thought about that before you removed me from my own airplane." Terrence turned to Warren. "Mr. Hughes, please ensure Captain Hutchinson leaves airport property immediately." Warren nodded to his security team. Eugene stepped forward with professional courtesy. "Captain, if you'll come with us, please." As they led Ronald away, Terrence turned back toward the aircraft. The jetway door still stood open. Inside that plane sat passengers who had watched his humiliation, who had whispered about him, who had assumed the worst. Time to complete this lesson. He walked down the jetway with Warren at his side. At the aircraft door, Diane stood frozen, her face ashen. She had heard everything through the open door. "Mr. Bradford the First." He held up a hand. "We'll discuss your role in this shortly. Right now, I need to address the passengers." Terrence stepped into the cabin. The first-class section erupted in whispers. Gregory Patterson, who had recoiled from sitting next to him, now sat rigid in seat 2B, staring straight ahead. The woman who had questioned where people like Terrence got money for first class suddenly found her magazine fascinating. Every passenger who had watched, who had judged, who had assumed, now faced the man they had dismissed. Terrence stood in the aisle and spoke clearly, projecting his voice to reach every row. "Good morning, everyone. My name is Terrence Bradford, and I am the CEO of Skybridge Airlines." The silence in the cabin was absolute. Not a cough, not a shuffle, not even the rustle of clothing, as passengers sat perfectly still, absorbing the impossible truth. Terrence continued, his voice steady but charged with emotion. 25 minutes ago, I attempted to board this aircraft as a passenger. I had a valid first-class ticket for seat 2A. I had proper identification. I had a credit card showing I purchased the seat legitimately. But your captain decided I didn't belong in first class. Not because of any policy violation. Not because of any actual irregularity. But because when he looked at me, he saw a black man and he decided that was reason enough to question my right to be here. Gregory Patterson's face had turned the color of spoiled milk. His hands gripped the armrests so tightly his knuckles showed white. Captain Hutchinson has been removed from this flight. He has been suspended from Skybridge Airlines. And depending on the outcome of our investigation, his career in aviation may be over. Someone in economy gasped. A few passengers shifted in their seats, but most remained frozen, processing the magnitude of what they had just witnessed. But Captain Hutchinson didn't act alone. He was enabled by a system that ignored complaints. He was protected by supervisors who valued convenience over justice. And he was emboldened by the silence of good people who watched discrimination happen and said nothing. Terrence turned to face the first-class cabin directly. Some of you in this cabin participated in what happened to me. You made assumptions. You whispered comments. You treated me as if I were a criminal whose presence needed explanation. Others simply watched in silence while I was humiliated. The woman who had questioned how people like him afford tickets now had tears running down her face. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. This flight will be delayed while we conduct a review of what happened here today. Every crew member who participated in or witnessed this discrimination will be interviewed. Those who remained silent when they should have spoken up will face consequences. Because silence enables racism. Silence protects discrimination. Silence allows injustice to flourish. A hand rose timidly from seat 2B. Gregory Patterson's voice came out hoarse. "Mr. Bradford, I need to say something." Terrence nodded. Gregory stood on shaky legs. His expensive suit, his Rolex, his carefully cultivated appearance of success, all of it seemed to diminish as he faced Terrence. "When you sat down next to me, I moved my bag away from you. I did that deliberately. I did it because—" his voice broke. "I did it because of your skin color. I saw a black man in first class, and I made assumptions. Terrible assumptions. I'm ashamed. I'm deeply, profoundly ashamed." "What's your full name?" Terrence asked. "Gregory Patterson. I'm a financial consultant from Chicago." "Mr. Patterson, thank you for your honesty. That's the beginning. Only the beginning, but it's something." Another passenger stood. The woman who had made the comment about money. She was younger than Terrence had initially thought, perhaps 40 with blonde hair and diamond earrings that caught the cabin lights. "My name is Constance Miller. I said awful things. I questioned how you could afford this seat. I said standards aren't what they used to be." Her voice shook. "I was raised to think those things. That's not an excuse. It's just the truth. I have to do better. I don't know how to apologize enough." "You can start," Terrence said quietly, "by examining those beliefs. By asking yourself where they came from. By deciding what kind of person you want to be." From the back of the first-class section, an elderly woman raised her hand. She had white hair and kind eyes that seemed genuinely distressed. "Young man, my name is Harriet Nelson. I'm 73 years old. I watched everything that happened, and I said nothing. I told myself it wasn't my business, that I shouldn't get involved. But that was wrong. Silence is complicity. I'm learning that too late in life, but I'm learning it. Mrs. Nelson, you're speaking now. That matters." Movement from the economy section. A black woman in her 40s stood up. She wore a simple dress and carried herself with quiet dignity. Tears streamed down her face. "Mr. Bradford, my name is Pearl Washington. I'm a teacher from Los Angeles. I watched what they did to you. I wanted to say something, but I was afraid. Afraid they'd target me next. Afraid of making a scene. I'm ashamed of my silence, too." Terrence felt his own eyes sting. "Miss Washington, I understand that fear. I've lived with it my whole life. The fear of standing out. The fear of making white people uncomfortable. The fear of being labeled angry or difficult. You don't need to apologize to me." "But I do," Pearl insisted. "My 15-year-old son wants to be a pilot. He dreams of flying. Today you showed him that he belongs in that cockpit, that he belongs anywhere his talent and work can take him. Thank you for not staying silent." The cabin seemed to collectively exhale. Other passengers began to speak, some apologizing, some sharing their own experiences with discrimination, some simply listening and learning. A young Asian woman in her 20s stood. "My name is Lila Chen. I'm Chinese American. I've been treated like I don't belong too. Different kind of discrimination, but it cuts the same. Thank you for doing this." Vincent Russo, the man who had complained about the delay earlier, stood with slumped shoulders.
I was annoyed about the holdup.
"I didn't even think about what you were experiencing. I just wanted to get to my meeting. I'm sorry for my indifference." Terrence raised his hands. "I appreciate all of this, truly. But words only matter if they lead to action. Awareness only matters if it creates change." He turned to Diane and Ruth, who had been standing near the galley throughout this entire exchange, both looking like they wished the floor would open and swallow them. "Miss Diane, how many times did you scan my boarding pass?" Diane's voice came out barely above a whisper. "3 times, sir." "And how many times do you typically scan a white passenger's boarding pass?" "Once." "Why did you scan mine 3 times?" Silence. "I'll answer for you. Because you didn't believe a black man could legitimately purchase a first-class seat. You assumed fraud. You assumed deception. You made that assumption in seconds, based solely on skin color." Diane's tears flowed freely now. "You're right. I did. And I'm sorry. Has been today. Diane. Miss Diane, you will be suspended pending our investigation. Your future with this airline depends on whether you can demonstrate genuine change, not just convenient apologies." He turned to Ruth. "And you, Miss Ruth. You're a supervisor. You have authority and responsibility. When you saw what was happening, you could have stopped it. You could have said, 'This passenger has valid documentation, and there's no legitimate reason to question him.' But instead, you escalated the situation. You called the captain. You enabled discrimination." Ruth nodded, unable to speak. "You will also be suspended. We will determine whether you deserve a second chance." From the cockpit doorway, a young man in a pilot's uniform appeared. He looked to be in his late 20s, with nervous eyes and a crew cut. His name tag read, First Officer Mitchell. "Mr. Bradford, sir, I'm the co-pilot on this flight. I need to tell you something." "Go ahead." "After you left the plane, I heard Captain Hutchinson in the cockpit. He used racial slurs," he said. Mitchell's voice hardened. "He said he wasn't going to let people like you ruin first class for real passengers. I should have reported it immediately. I should have refused to fly with him. But I was afraid of losing my job. I'm so sorry." Terrence studied the young pilot. Fear, careerism, the same forces that allowed injustice to perpetuate. "First Officer Mitchell, you're young, you felt powerless. I understand that. But you have a choice now. You can submit a full written statement detailing exactly what Captain Hutchinson said. Everything you've witnessed during your time flying with him. That statement could help ensure he never does this to another passenger. Will you provide that statement?" "Yes, sir." "Absolutely. Then you'll keep your job. And you'll learn from this. The next time you see discrimination, you'll speak up immediately. Understood?" "Yes, sir. I promise." Terrence pulled out his phone and made a call on speaker so the entire cabin could hear. "Catherine, it's me. Patch me through to the executive board conference line. Emergency session." Within 2 minutes, his phone connected to a conference call with 8 board members, the chief financial officer, the chief operations officer, and the head of human resources, Solomon Grant. "Everyone, you're on speaker. I'm standing in the first-class cabin of Flight 747. 30 minutes ago, Captain Ronald Hutchinson removed me from this aircraft because I'm black. He denied my right to sit in first class. He humiliated me in front of dozens of witnesses. And based on his personnel file, he's been doing this to passengers of color for over a decade." Shocked voices erupted from the phone. "Terrence, my God, this is unacceptable. How did this happen?" Terrence continued. "It happened because we had a system that buried complaints. A culture that protected problematic employees. Supervisors who chose convenience over accountability. This stops today. Here's what's going to happen. He began outlining his plan, and the passengers listened as the CEO transformed rage into policy. 1. Effective immediately, all Skybridge employees will undergo mandatory anti-bias training within the next 30 days. No exceptions. Flight crew, gate agents, customer service, everyone. Solomon's voice came through the speaker. We can have a program designed and implemented within 2 weeks, sir. 2. We're establishing an independent passenger rights committee. This committee will review all discrimination complaints and have the authority to recommend termination without requiring management approval. No more internal burial of complaints. The CFO spoke up. Terrence, that's going to be expensive. We'll need external oversight investigators. I don't care about the cost. We're spending the money. Put it in the budget. 3. Any employee found guilty of racial discrimination will be immediately terminated. No second chances for bigotry. No sensitivity training as a slap on the wrist. You discriminate, you're fired. 4. We're creating a passenger bill of rights that explicitly prohibits racial profiling. It will be posted in every airport gate, every aircraft, every customer service area, and we're going to advertise it. I want every passenger to know their rights. One of the board members, an older woman named Patricia, spoke carefully. Terrence, I support all of this, but won't it create PR problems? Admitting we have discrimination issues. Patricia, we have discrimination issues whether we admit them or not. The difference is whether we hide from them or confront them head on. I'm choosing confrontation. He ended the call and turned back to the passengers. You've all heard what's going to change at this airline. But change can't just be corporate policy. It has to be personal. Each of you witnessed injustice today. Each of you has a choice about what you do with that experience. Pearl Washington stood again. Mr. Bradford, can I say something to everyone here? Of course. Pearl turned to face the other passengers, particularly those in first class. I'm a history teacher. I teach about the civil rights movement. I teach about Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King Jr. I teach about lunch counter sit-ins and freedom rides. My students always ask, where were the white allies? Why didn't more people speak up? And now I know the answer. Fear, indifference, the comfort of staying silent. But today some of you spoke up even though it was uncomfortable. Some of you admitted fault even though it was humiliating. That's how change happens. One honest moment at a time. Gregory Patterson stood beside her. Miss Washington is right. I've spent my whole life with unconscious biases. I never examined. Today forced me to see them. I can't undo what I did, but I can commit to being different going forward. Constance Miller nodded. I have 2 daughters. I was raising them with the same prejudices I was raised with. Not anymore. This ends with my generation. Harriet Nelson added her voice. I'm 73. I thought I was too old to change. But if I can learn, anyone can. Lila Chen spoke up. When we see discrimination, we have to speak up. Even when it's scary. Even when it's inconvenient. Especially then. Vincent Russo cleared his throat. I work in corporate HR. I'm going to bring what I learned today back to my company. We need training too. One by one, passengers committed to change. Some promised to have difficult conversations with family members. Some pledged to speak up when they witnessed discrimination. Some simply promised to examine their own biases. Terrence felt something shift in the cabin. This wasn't just about one incident anymore. It was about creating a moment of collective awakening, turning pain into purpose. His phone buzzed. A text from Warren Hughes, the airport director. New captain en route, Captain Eleanor Washington. ETA, 10 minutes. Terrence smiled. Eleanor Washington. No relation to Pearl, but the coincidence felt meaningful. He addressed the cabin one final time before the new captain arrived. We're going to resume this flight shortly. You'll have a new captain. You'll have a crew that understands the seriousness of what happened here. And you'll have my personal commitment that Skybridge Airlines will be better. From economy, a passenger called out. Mr. Bradford, will you still take your first-class seat? The cabin held its breath. Terrence looked at seat 2A, the seat he had been denied. The seat that had become the center of this confrontation. The seat that represented everything he had fought for in his life. "Yes," he said simply, "I paid for that seat. I earned that seat. And nobody gets to tell me I don't belong there." Spontaneous applause erupted. It started in economy and rolled forward through the cabin like a wave. Passengers stood. Some wiped away tears. Others simply clapped until their hands hurt. Gregory Patterson extended his hand to Terrence. "Sir, it would be an honor to sit next to you." Terrence shook his hand firmly. 10 minutes later, Captain Eleanor Washington boarded the aircraft. She was a black woman in her mid-40s, with 25 years of flying experience and a reputation as one of the finest pilots in the industry. When passengers saw her, another round of applause broke out. Eleanor's voice came over the intercom, warm and professional. "Good morning, passengers. I'm Captain Eleanor Washington, and I'll be flying you to Los Angeles today. I understand this flight has had an unusual start. I want you to know that every person on this aircraft matters. Every person deserves respect, and every person will receive the dignity they're entitled to. Now, let's get you safely to California." The flight to Los Angeles took 5 hours. But for the passengers on board, it became more than just a journey across the country. It became a shared experience that many would remember for the rest of their lives. Terrence settled into seat 2A. The leather felt soft against his back. The extra legroom stretched before him. The window showed clouds and sky. This was what he had paid for. This was what he deserved. And now, finally, he could enjoy it. Gregory Patterson sat in 2B, but the hostile distance from earlier had vanished. During the flight, they talked about business, about family, about the assumptions we carry and the work required to unlearn them. "I have a confession," Gregory said, as they flew over Texas. "My company has diversity initiatives. We talk about inclusion. We have quotas. But I never really examined my own biases. I thought because I wasn't actively hostile, I was fine. Today showed me how wrong I was." "That's the insidious nature of unconscious bias," Terrence replied. "It hides behind good intentions and polite society. You don't think you're racist because you don't use slurs or join hate groups. But then you pull your bag away from a black man on an airplane." Gregory flinched. "I'm not making excuses, but I was taught those reflexes. Taught to see black people as threatening. Taught to protect my belongings. Taught that success and intelligence have a certain look, and that look is white. So now you unlearn it. How? You start by acknowledging it, which you did. Then you actively work against those reflexes. When you feel yourself making an assumption based on race, you stop and question it. You seek out diverse perspectives. You listen more than you speak. You use your privilege to amplify voices that get ignored." Gregory nodded slowly. "My firm could use someone like you as a consultant. We clearly need help." Terrence handed him a business card. "Have your CEO call me. We're developing a training program. Your company can be part of the pilot group." Across the aisle, Constance Miller sat with her husband, having quiet conversations about their values and their children. At one point, she crossed the aisle to speak with Pearl Washington. "Miss Washington, I know my apology doesn't fix anything, but I want you to know I'm going to do better. I'm going to challenge racist comments instead of letting them slide. I'm going to examine how I talk to my daughters about race." Pearl squeezed her hand. "That's all any of us can do. Commit to being better today than we were yesterday." Further back in economy, other conversations bloomed. Passengers who had never discussed race began tentative dialogues, some uncomfortable, some awkward, but all necessary. Diane, the flight attendant who had scanned Terrence's ticket 3 times, served the first-class cabin with shaking hands. When she reached Terrence's row, she paused. "Mr. Bradford, I know I'm suspended after we land. I know I probably deserve to be fired. But I want you to know that I'm going to spend my suspension doing some serious self-reflection. I'm going to figure out where these biases came from and how to root them out." "I appreciate that, Diane. Change is possible, but only if you're willing to do the hard work." "I am. I promise. I am." First, Officer Mitchell stopped by during his break. "Sir, I submitted my written statement. Everything Captain Hutchinson said. Everything I've witnessed. It's detailed and it's damning. Thank you. That took courage. Not as much courage as you showed today. Captain Eleanor Washington emerged from the cockpit to stretch her legs. She stopped at Terrence's seat. Boss, permission to speak freely. Terrence smiled. Always. What you did today will ripple through this entire industry. Pilots talk. Crews talk. By tomorrow, every airline in America will know this story. You didn't just change Skybridge. You put every airline on notice. Good. It's long overdue. Can I tell you something? I almost quit flying 5 years ago. I was tired of the discrimination, tired of passengers questioning my authority, tired of being asked if I was the real pilot or just someone's diversity hire. But I stayed because I thought about the young black girls who needed to see someone who looked like them in that cockpit, like Pearl Washington's son. Exactly. Representation matters. But it's not enough. We need systemic change. What you're doing, that's systemic change. As they descended toward Los Angeles, Terrence looked around the cabin. These strangers had become witnesses to something important. Some had participated in injustice. Some had enabled it through silence. But many had also begun the difficult work of change. His phone showed dozens of text messages. News of the incident had spread. Media requests, messages of support from civil rights organizations, notes from other CEOs in the industry. One message caught his eye. From the chairman of the board, Terrence, the board stands behind you 100%. Whatever resources you need for these changes, you have them. Another from Catherine Sir. Social media is exploding. Skybridge accountability is trending #1 nationally, and it's overwhelmingly supportive. The landing was smooth. As the plane taxied to the gate, Captain Washington's voice came over the intercom one last time. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Los Angeles. I want to thank you for your patience during this unusual flight. More importantly, I want to thank those of you who spoke up today, who admitted fault, who committed to change. That's how we build a better world. One honest conversation at a time. Passengers applauded again. As they deplaned, many stopped to shake Terrence's hand, to thank him, to apologize again, to promise they would remember this day. Pearl Washington was one of the last to leave. She handed Terrence a handwritten note. This is my son's name and email. Marcus. He's 15, and he's been saving money for flight school. If there's ever anything your airline can do to help a young black kid achieve his dreams, please remember him. Terrence took the note carefully. Miss Washington Skybridge just started a scholarship program for aspiring pilots from underrepresented communities. Have Marcus apply. I'll personally review his application. Pearl's eyes filled with tears. You're changing lives, Mr. Bradford. Not just today. For years to come. The Los Angeles terminal buzzed with normal airport activity, but a crowd of reporters waited at the gate. Word had spread fast. A CEO removed from his own airline. A pilot suspended for discrimination. A story that touched every nerve in America's ongoing conversation about race. Terrence had a choice. He could slip away through a side entrance, avoid the cameras, let the PR department handle it. But he had spent his entire life being told to make himself smaller, quieter, less threatening. Not today. He walked directly toward the reporters. Cameras flashed. Microphones thrust forward. Mr. Bradford, can you tell us what happened on that flight? Mr. Bradford, are you filing a lawsuit? Mr. Bradford, what message does this send? He raised his hand, and the chaos settled. Today, I experienced what millions of black Americans experience regularly. I was presumed guilty. I was assumed to be where I didn't belong. I was treated as less than human. The only difference between me and countless other passengers is that I had the power to demand immediate accountability. But what about those who don't have that power? What happens to them? The reporters scribbled frantically. Skybridge Airlines is implementing sweeping changes, mandatory anti-bias training, an independent oversight committee, zero tolerance for discrimination. But this can't just be one airline's response. This has to be an industry-wide reckoning. A reporter called out, "What do you say to critics who might argue you're being too harsh on Captain Hutchinson, that he made a mistake?" Terrence's jaw tightened. This wasn't a mistake. Mistakes are accidents. This was a choice. A choice to see my skin color and make assumptions. A choice to abuse his authority. A choice he made 7 other times according to his personnel file. At what point do we stop calling racism a mistake and start calling it what it is, a moral failing that deserves consequences? What happens to Captain Hutchinson now? That depends on our investigation. But I can tell you this. If the investigation confirms what I already know, Ronald Hutchinson will never fly for Skybridge Airlines again. Do you worry about backlash, about being called too aggressive or angry? Terrence almost laughed. I've been called angry my entire life for simply existing as a black man with opinions and standards. If demanding basic human dignity makes me angry, then yes, I'm angry. And I'm not apologizing for it. The press conference continued for 20 minutes. Terrence answered every question with unflinching honesty. By the time he finished, the story had gone viral. Number Skybridge accountability trended alongside Number Black CEO and Number Flying While Black. 2 weeks later, the investigation concluded. The findings were damning. Ronald Hutchinson had a documented pattern of discriminatory behavior spanning over 12 years, 7 official complaints, numerous informal reports from passengers and crew that had been dismissed or ignored. He had created a hostile environment for passengers of color and had weaponized his authority against the vulnerable. He was terminated immediately. The Federal Aviation Administration opened its own investigation and suspended his pilot's license pending review. But the story didn't end there. Diane and Ruth, the flight attendants who had enabled the discrimination, completed an intensive 8-week bias training program. They submitted to regular monitoring. They participated in restorative justice conversations with civil rights organizations. After 6 months of probation, they were reinstated with permanent notes in their files. First Officer Mitchell became an advocate for speaking up against discrimination. He joined the Independent Oversight Committee and helped develop training scenarios for new pilots. Gregory Patterson donated $50,000 to Skybridge's new scholarship fund for aspiring pilots of color. He also hired a diversity consultant for his firm and implemented sweeping changes in their hiring and promotion practices. Constance Miller joined a local racial justice organization and began facilitating difficult conversations in her community about unconscious bias. Pearl Washington's son Marcus received a full scholarship to flight school through the Skybridge program. 3 years later, he would become one of the youngest black pilots hired by the airline. Skybridge's changes became a model for the industry. Within a year, 5 other major airlines had adopted similar policies. Discrimination complaints across the industry dropped by 68%. Training programs proliferated. Oversight committees formed. But perhaps the most significant change was cultural. The story had sparked a national conversation. Passengers became more willing to speak up when they witnessed discrimination. Employees felt empowered to challenge problematic behavior. The airline industry began to reckon with its long history of racial profiling. 6 months after the incident, Terrence sat in his office overlooking the Atlanta skyline. His assistant, Catherine, knocked and entered. "Sir, you have a visitor. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's important." "Who is it?" "Eleanor Washington, the captain from that flight." "Send her in." Eleanor entered with a young man in a crisp school uniform. He was 15 tall and lanky with bright, intelligent eyes. "Mr. Bradford, I hope we're not interrupting. This is Marcus Washington, Pearl's son. No relation to me, but I heard about his scholarship and I wanted to meet him. And he wanted to meet you." Marcus stepped forward shyly and extended his hand. "Mr. Bradford, sir, I wanted to thank you in person. Because of what you did, I'm going to flight school." "Because of what you did, I know I belong in that cockpit. Because of what you did, I have a future." Terrence shook his hand firmly. "Marcus, you always belonged in that cockpit. You always deserved that future. I just made sure the door was open for you to walk through it. Can I ask you something, sir?" "Of course." "Were you scared when the captain told you to leave?" Terrence thought about that question, about the fear he had felt, the humiliation, the rage. "Yes," he said honestly. "I was scared. Scared of making a scene. Scared of confirming stereotypes about angry black men. Scared that even as CEO I still didn't have enough power to protect myself. But I was more scared of staying silent. Because silence means nothing changes. Silence means the next person suffers the same indignity. I couldn't live with that. Marcus nodded solemnly. When I become a pilot, I'm going to remember that. I'm going to speak up. I'm going to make sure everyone feels like they belong. Then you'll be exactly the kind of pilot we need. After they left, Terrence walked to his window. Below, aircraft took off and landed in precise choreography. Each plane carried hundreds of passengers. Each passenger deserved dignity. Each person mattered. His phone buzzed. An email from Pearl, Washington, with a photo attached. Marcus standing in front of a flight simulator, grinning from ear to ear, wearing a flight suit. The subject line read, "Dreams, taking flight. Thank you." Terrence smiled and set down his phone. He thought about his father, who had worked on aircraft, but never imagined his son would run an airline. He thought about his mother, who had endured indignities with grace, but always pushed him to demand better. He thought about every passenger of color who had been questioned, profiled, removed, or humiliated for no reason except prejudice. The fight wasn't over. It never would be. Racism didn't disappear because of one incident or one set of policy changes. But every time someone stood up, every time someone demanded accountability, every time someone transformed pain into progress, the world shifted just a little bit. One brave moment at a time. The phone on his desk rang. Catherine's voice came through. "Sir, the board is ready for you in the conference room. They want to discuss expanding the scholarship program. Tell them I'll be right there." Terrence grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. There was work to do. There was always work to do. But today, a young man named Marcus was one step closer to his dreams. Today, an industry was being forced to confront its demons. Today, change was happening. And that made every difficult moment worth it. So let me ask you something important. What would you have done if you were a passenger on that flight? Would you have spoken up like some did? Would you have stayed silent like others? Comment below and be honest with yourself, because real change starts with honest self. Reflection. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you that we all have power to fight injustice in our everyday lives, then do 3 things for me. First, hit that like button. Second, subscribe to this channel so you never miss stories that matter. Third, and this is the most important one, share this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Share it with someone who might not want to hear it. Share it in spaces where conversations about race are uncomfortable, because those are exactly the spaces where this story needs to be told. Drop a comment telling me where you're from and one thing you'll do differently after hearing this story. Will you speak up next time you see discrimination? Will you examine your own biases? Will you have that difficult conversation with family or friends? Tell me in the comments. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring enough to watch this story all the way through. That matters more than you know. Remember, change doesn't happen in boardrooms or legislatures first. It happens in moments, in choices, in individual people deciding to be better today than they were yesterday. Be that person. Until next time, keep standing up. Keep speaking out. Keep demanding that we all do better. Because justice doesn't just happen. We make it happen. Together. This story teaches us that discrimination thrives in silence and dies in accountability. Terrence Bradford's experience reveals how systemic racism operates not just through overt hostility, but through assumptions, microaggressions, and the passive complicity of bystanders. The most powerful lesson is that change requires both institutional reform and personal transformation. We learn that bias exists at every level, even in spaces that claim diversity and inclusion. Captain Hutchinson's pattern of discrimination persisted for 12 years because complaints were buried and problematic behavior was excused. This shows us that policies without enforcement are meaningless. Real accountability demands independent oversight, transparent processes, and zero tolerance for prejudice. The passengers who spoke up demonstrate another crucial truth: privilege carries responsibility. Gregory Patterson, Constance Miller, and others could have remained silent, but they chose discomfort over complicity. Their willingness to acknowledge fault and commit to change shows that growth is possible when we face our biases honestly. Perhaps most importantly, this story reminds us that standing up against injustice always carries risk. Terrence could have revealed his identity immediately and avoided humiliation. Instead, he let the situation unfold to expose the full extent of discrimination. Sometimes, the hardest fights are the most necessary. We must ask ourselves, when we witness injustice, do we speak up or stay silent? Our answer determines what kind of world we build. What moment in this story hit you hardest? Was it when Terrence was removed from his seat, when the passengers admitted their bias, or when young Marcus got his scholarship? Drop your answer in the comments because I want to hear what resonated with you. Here's my challenge. If you've ever stayed silent when you should have spoken up, comment, "I'll do better," and commit to change. If this story opened your eyes to biases you didn't know you had, comment, "I'm listening and learning." And if you've experienced discrimination like Terrence did, share your story if you feel comfortable. Your voice matters. Now, smash that like button if you believe accountability matters more than comfort. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss stories that challenge us to be better. And here's the most important part. Share this video. Share it with your family, your coworkers, your friends who need to understand what discrimination really looks like in everyday moments. Thank you for watching, for caring, and for being willing to have uncomfortable conversations. Thank you for believing that we can build a world where everyone belongs, where dignity isn't negotiable, and where standing up for what's right is always worth it. Remember, justice doesn't happen by accident. We create it through courage, accountability, and the refusal to accept discrimination as normal. Go out there and be part of the change. The world is waiting for your voice. Until next time, keep fighting for what's right. Keep demanding better. Keep believing that one person's courage can spark a movement. You've got this. We've got this. Together.